investigation. Thanks very much to Jeff Zeleny there in Indiana. So the president very busy today on Twitter, but heck, these are presidential statements, so we got to run through them almost one by one. I mean, one of the most revealing is his comments on Don Mcgahn. The president said the rigged Russia witch hunt, as he's come to call it, did not come into play even a little bit with respect to my decision to buy on Don Mcgahn. So first of all, do you buy that it didn't come into play at all?
I find this president has a tendency to project what he's worried people are thinking in these, and I don't see how it wasn't the factor. I mean, there'd been grumbling for some time that he was unhappy with him, but all of a sudden, right now, he's going out just weeks after this came out. And then I love how he says, well, my kids, it wasn't their idea or anything. And I don't know how much we were even talking about that before that. So I find it hard to not infer that this is what he's concerned is the truth and that we might recognize.
For me, the startling thing is my decision on Don Mcgahn. Right. It was well known around town among his lawyer friends that Mcgahn was going to leave after Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed. That would be his victory lap. He got from a conservative point of view, two excellent Supreme Court justices confirmed, a whole ton of Circuit Court judges. He wanted to get out, I think, before the rubber really hit the road in terms of Sessions and maybe the Mueller report. So this is McGahn's choice. But Trump can't stand the idea that a grown man who is his White House counsel has chosen to resign after 2 years, which is a perfectly normal span of office. Trump has to be, I guess this is the narcissistic personality, he has to be the one in charge. It has to be his decision to fire McGahn, in effect, which is a foolish thing, incidentally, for Trump to want to say. The
White House was confronted about this. Said, did the president just confirm that he fired Don Mcgahn? The White House said, no, it was his decision to announce that he was leaving via Twitter. You've covered
that's a courtesy. It really seems like, looking at these tweets, that he was reacting to the spate of stories that just came out. One of which, I can't remember, it was the Post or the Times, so forgive me, said that Ivanka and Jared Kushner were unhappy with Don Mcgahn, and that's one of the reasons that he was, pushed out so unceremoniously. Because there wasn't really, as Bill said, there wasn't really a timeline. We knew he was leaving; we didn't know when. So it seems like. And it had to do with how Don Mcgahn sat down with Mueller for 30 hours. Jared and Ivanka reportedly were not happy about that. So it seems like that's, if we're putting the pieces together, he was either being told of this news or was watching it on the cable and live tweeting it, which is always weird when you're not watching the same thing that the person is live tweeting.
Here's what the president said on that. Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner had nothing, all caps, to do with the so-called pushing out of Don Mcgahn there. But Amanda, it's CNN's reporting, and not just CNN has reported this, that when it was learned that Don Mcgahn had sat down with the special counsel prosecutors for 30 hours voluntarily, that the president himself was not happy with that. Can we presume that that was part of the calculation here?
I think there's a thread line that runs through a lot of tweets in Trump's commentary today, and that has to do with the possible obstruction of justice case. Don Mcgahn, as White House counsel, was privy to a lot of events that circle around obstruction of justice issues regarding, Trump pressuring James Comey to drop the case on Mike Flynn, the firing of James Comey, the list goes on and on. But it all goes back to that question. And if Trump is really sitting down with lawyers and advisors and talking about the possibility of impeachment, an obstruction of justice case is clearly, I think, based on everything that we've seen play out in public, going to be much stronger possibly than a conspiracy case, because we can see all that play out. And the fact that Don Mcgahn sat down again for 30 hours has got to be just nagging him.
I think it is worth, connecting the statements today with what is clearly a pattern with this president, which is to attack the credibility of both witnesses and evidence in this investigation, right? James Comey was in the room when he was fired, certainly, but when he made the request regarding Michael Flynn, he's been attacking James Comey for a year. On facts as well. He even went so far as to claim that what he told Lester Holt about firing James Comey, even though we've seen it on videotape, we're going to deal with this more in the next block, a million times, somehow claimed that was made up. Is this not part of a strategy as opposed to just the, his, letting loose as he gets angry?
Yeah, it's sort of jury tampering on a grand scale. Well, think of the Manafort case, which was a pretty cut and dry case, and they did get one juror to not convict, vote to convict on 10 counts. And if you just sort of, now let's talk about the American public as a whole. Let's talk about the House and the Senate as a whole, especially the Republican Party. He wants to sow enough doubts, throw enough mud against the wall, make it confusing enough, attack the prosecutors in an OJ-type way, that enough of his supporters can rationalize to themselves sticking with him. He's given up on persuading, I think, anyone who wasn't already on his team, but he's trying to get his team to stick with him no matter what the Mueller report says.
Hold the beachhead, in effect.
Yeah.
Sorry, Robbie.
Well, no. And some of this is just a bandwidth issue, right? He understands that he is the president. When he tweets something out, you have to report on it. And so if he can just burn up a piece of the conversation by putting this out there, he's taking away time that could be used to focus more on what he's done wrong. And so I absolutely think it's a strategy. And, this is what's so hard, I think, for in the news business nowadays, is how do you get it all in there when he's putting this out?
Well, and we've seen Giuliani is also echoing this, and he's putting together, he actually spoke to the Daily Beast this afternoon, and he's putting together his own report to counter the Mueller investigation. But it is basically what this thing is going to do. It's aimed at discrediting what they think might be in the report. And it's a lot of publicly available information that's going to be in this document that hasn't been released, but it's going to be aimed solely at discrediting the Mueller investigation.
What does this remind you of? The GOP memo, right? I mean, let's put it, Nunes, you put out competing narratives, grab as much as you can of the public sphere, really, in terms, make them skeptical and then call that a victory.
But the challenge is, I think, for reasonable people, especially for us in the news and commentary business, is to focus on the original source. We all saw the tape of Donald Trump speaking with Lester Holt. The tape spoke for itself. And so, I wrote a whole book about how Trump gaslights people, and this is a prime example of how he does it again. But look at the tapes.
Will this be in the paperback?
Look at his own words. Yeah, I'll update it with another chapter. But his gaslighting of Comey and the entire, national security complex has been amazing, and this is another revelation of that.
Well, listen, we have a lot more to talk specifically on that. Coming up, though, President Trump said on tape, as we were saying, that he had Russia on his mind when he fired former FBI Director James Comey. Now, he's saying that the tape was fudged somehow. Where's the evidence for that claim? Is there any evidence? And inquiring minds want to know, what are a flat-out lie? In a rant against the media, he tweeted, in part, quote, "When Lester Holt got caught fudging my tape on Russia, they were hurt badly." Number one, no one was caught fudging anything. Number two, no one was hurt badly. Number three, and most importantly, the tape speaks for itself. Here's what NBC aired on May 11th, 2017, 2 days after the president fired FBI Director James Comey.
But regardless of recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, I said, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election.
That is what the president said on tape. The public has been seeing this tape for, 15 months now. What is the president trying to do here? Is he trying to claim that didn't happen or that it was edited somehow?
I'm struck that he raised the Lester Holt interview this morning, which hasn't been in the news particularly, has it? So which makes me think Amanda is right, that they have heard something at the White House that makes them worried, makes him worried. His lawyers have heard something, perhaps, that the obstruction of justice case is further along, perhaps, than we realize. Maybe someone else is flipped. Maybe Mueller's about to indict some more people. Maybe they have information. They've told the president they don't need to have an interview with him because he's now a target of the investigation, or maybe could be an unindicted co-conspirator, whatever. Because suddenly, why was Lester Holt on his mind? That hasn't been something we've been debating, really. CNN's been in the news, but Lester Holt's interview was a long time ago. And somehow he now realizes this is part of a pattern of obstruction, and he needs to begin to start discrediting it, however, as you say, unreasonable or ridiculous his attempt to discredit is.
He tried to do that with the Access Hollywood tape. He was telling people behind the scenes that he didn't think it was him.
He told